Right, now I'm often asked by students how they deal with painting very complex and ornate buildings like these examples. If you've ever been to Venice, you may recognise immediately here we've got the church of the Santa Maria della Salute, and here we've got on its own island the church and the campanile or the bell tower of San Giorgio Maggiore. It's very easy, even if you paint the picture competently, to turn what is a lively and fresh picture into something that is dull and wooden and boring. I've got to be honest, you probably wouldn't get that view as it sits here with the Della Salute and the San Giorgio in that precise position and also close to the quayside. Now, as an artist, that shouldn't cause you a problem, because it's you who are creating the composition, and if you want to bring in some gondolas here and perhaps bring these two features slightly closer together than they are in reality, or pull them apart depending on how you want your composition to work, then that's fine, you're the artist. And what I'm going to try and demonstrate is that simply by painting a silhouette of these buildings and just the merest hint of some of the features, that you can create an impression in people's mind of exactly where you're trying to portray, in this case the waterfront at Venice. Now, although I've drawn in a ruled line to give us the water line for the Santa Maria della Salute, I actually want this building to be slightly closer, and the way we achieve that is just by dropping that line just a fraction. So now I'm just going to lower the water line for this building by 1/16 of an inch, couple of millimeters, whatever measurement you use. Now that's important because it'll just help to define the distance between the two buildings. Right, now first thing I'm going to do, as you can see, is to dampen all of the paper. Right, now you can see I'm putting in a very pale wash of raw sienna. It's diluting as ever down with the water that's in the paper. Right, now just a simple mix of ultramarine and permanent rose. Bit more on the blue side here than the red side, and then I'm going to just concentrate on this area here. Again, it's quite pale because I'm trying to create the atmosphere of fairly early morning in Venice, and the same with the water here. Right, that's fine, it's giving me the atmosphere I want, where the sun is coming up here just out of shot, but it's starting to put a glow on these buildings and on this side of the scene. Now, to make sure that runs nicely and evenly, I'm just going to tip this, as you've seen me do before, in all sorts of different directions. Right, now we've let it dry, everything's paled off quite a bit, and in other circumstances I might actually be saying, oh, I've done the sky a little bit too pale and too wishy-washy, but of course we're trying to get an early morning scene here when the sky is going to be pale and relatively cool, even though it's sunny. Right, now I'm mixing together some permanent rose and raw sienna, and I've just added a little touch of ultramarine blue, only a tiny touch, just to grey it ever so slightly. I'm just, as you can see, painting clean water. Well, it's actually got a little bit of the residue of the pink colour on it. If you do that quite confidently and freely and practice that, it's quite surprising how quickly you'll be able to draw a relatively straight line when you want to create a water line or a horizon line. Now this actually goes against the grain slightly, because you'll know I've said in other lessons that things further away get bluer and greyer and paler. Well, it'll certainly be paler than this area here, but it actually might be slightly pinker, and that's the colour we're going to use. It's actually diluting slightly because, of course, we've got the water in the paper already. I'm just bringing in a little bit of blue here and there, just on the shadow side. That's a bit too dark, so we'll take that out very quickly. The beauty of painting the area with water first, of course, is that you can confidently drag paint around, and it'll tend to stop dead when it hits a dry spot where you've not painted or dampened the paper. So you can be a little bit cavalier the way you paint with this, knowing that you've got every chance that it's going to stay and not go where it oughtn't to go. Okay, now remember what I said. I want to blot this out and just give ourselves a nice misty effect. Just keep turning the paper. You don't want any of this going back on the sky. It's detail and it's not detail, isn't it? But you can see the way you've got the subtle shadow on the right hand side. That ultramarine blue I put in to start with by mistake here has turned out very well for us actually. Exactly the same principle, except this time we've got a slightly stronger mix, and if anything slightly more blue into it, because it'll be in slightly more silhouette, being that much closer than the Santa Maria buildings. But I want to create this. This is where the timing comes in. I'm conscious that the paint or the water is still sitting and shiny on the surface, but I want to create this sort of misty atmosphere in the building, or the group of buildings rather, and if I let it dry off too much, particularly with the heat of these lights in the studio, then it's going to give me hard edges, which is the last thing that I want. Tiny little gap there, can you see, helps to define the distance between this island and the Santa Maria church and all the other buildings. Right, now I've also just lifted out some gentle highlights where I thought the sun would be catching the back of this area here, which is just above the pillared entrance to the church itself, and also a little bit more highlights here and there just on some of the rooftops that will be catching the sun coming from this left hand side. Right, so although I know this is something of an extreme if you're painting buildings, it does show that you don't have to worry about getting every little window pane and door frame in exactly the right place when you're dealing with a complex set of buildings. Now I want a couple of other things happening just in the water because it's a little bit empty with the sun, and what I think I'll do, which would be a nice addition, will be one or two hints of the vaporettos, which are the water buses that ply their way up the Grand Canal and round the outskirts of Venice. I'm just going to run the brush about 1/4 of an inch below this part of the far bank, and that'll give a light streak to this area of water. You notice that these waves here, or the shimmering light, is closed up as it gets further out into the lagoon and gets darker and heavier as it gets towards the foreground here. Right, now you can see I've put the merest hint of a little reflection. It just indicates perhaps that the water is quite calm, but we don't want it as a full-blown sharp reflection. It is a hint. Now the key to doing boats in this sort of scene is really absolutely to simplify. You're looking to get the basic shape of the boat in a couple of quick brush strokes. Right, now you can see that I'm just messing around with nothing much more complicated than the ballpoint pen and a line pad, and I'm just getting a clear idea in my head of how these vaporettos actually work, or what they actually look like. And I think I'll probably put a little launch in, something like that, a little bit further out. Again, you see how simple that is. Shallow bucket shape, a little bit of a banana shape, a little hook on the end to represent the bows coming round. Normally I'd just paint this in without bothering with pencil work, but it's just to give you an idea of what the shape looks like. And then we'll also give the boat a little bit of a hint of shadow underneath the bows there, that's important, and just a little hint of shadow and reflection and what have you there. I'm just actually going to take out some of the colour here where the poles actually are going to sit in the water. You can see now, if we just let that dry off for a minute, and then we'll just put some light and shade and just a little bit of modelling on that. Some dark shadow underneath there like that, where there would be quite a strong reflection and shadow in this area here. Right, and just a little impression that the sun is catching the bows of the gondola as we just lift out that little bit of highlight just there like that. So there we are, early morning in Venice with a whole load of complicated buildings produced very simply and without any heartache at all.